Hello everyone and welcome to Decode Java. In this video, I'm going to talk about exception handling in Java. As a Java developer, it is extremely important to know how to handle errors in our code. And that's where exception come in. In this video, we are going to cover what exceptions are, how to handle them, and best practices for exception handling in Java. So first let's start with what are exceptions. An exception is an error that occurs during the execution of a program. Exceptions can happen for many reasons, such as invalid input, some error in the network, or we are making a call to a service and the service fails. So there can be various reasons. In Java, exceptions are represented by a class that are part of Java standard library. When an exception happens, the Java runtime system creates an object with an appropriate exception class. Now that we understand what exceptions are, for handling a Java exception, all we need to do is use a try-catch block. So here, for example, if we need to have, or if we think that there will be an exception, we can create a try-catch block, and you can see here there's a try-catch block, which is try and then catch exception. So I can just click it, and this is a try-catch block, and inside of this, any code which is written inside of the try block, if it causes any exception, then it will be caught by this catch block, and then here we can process it. Now here, for the catch block, we can have multiple catch block. Like we can have another catch block here. But when we have multiple catch block, we always have to start from a more specific exception to a more generic exception. The exception object is the highest level of exception, so it is extremely generic. So we can start with something like index out of bound exception. If we do that, this is a more specific, and then we are going to generic. That is the standard practice. So the best practices for exception handling, the number one is it's very important to only catch exception that we can handle. For example, if we cannot handle an exception or we don't know what to do with after we catch an exception, it's better to let it bubble up, because we don't want to catch something and ignore it. For example, if there was a database transaction or database operation and we got an exception from the database and our code is just a data handling layer, it's better not to catch the exception. I mean, we can catch the exception, log it, but we should rethrow it so that the caller can decide what they want to do with the exception. The second one is that it is good practice to handle exception as close to the source of the error as possible. This makes it easier to understand what actually caused the exception. For example, if it is a database related error, it is better to catch in the data access layer and handle it here. So that will help understand it better, but you have to take a judgmental call, because sometime, as I mentioned, if you are just doing some atomic operation and this atomic operation is part of a larger set of operation, it's better to throw the exception back to the caller. And the last one is it's important to always include a finally block with the try catch. Finally block is something which will get called regardless of an exception or not. So here, if we provide a finally, this block of code will be called irrespective of exception or not. So let's say we do a system.out.println. It will print always, irrespective of what happens. So there's not even a single line of code here, but if we run this application, the finally will get executed. But if we have this here, which prints the exception E, and let's make it as IE index out of bound exception. And here we print out the i.e. these two statements, this one and this one, will not get printed. The only thing which will get printed is the finally one. So let's compile and then run. And if we run, you can see, we see that always, the print always statement showing up. Now here, for this purpose, what we can do is we can create a new class and we can say, let's say user provider dot java. And this is a class which is a method, public void print, let's say. But here, instead of printing, we're just going to throw new index out of bound exception and say index of 1. We're going to throw this exception. Now at this point here, what we are going to do inside of the try block, we create user provider is equal to new user provider, and we're going to do provider dot print. Now this is going to generate an index out of bound exception, due to which we are going to print this statement here. It's going to print the index out of bound, but in the end it will also print the print finally. So let's go back, compile and run, and we can see here we got an index out of bound exception, and then we got the print always. So this goes to show you how we can have. Now this user provider could throw some other exception. Now instead of index out of bound exception, we can throw an exception like, let's say, class cast exception. Let's say we throw this, and here just provide error as a. Now here when it comes, it's going to throw an error in the print, and it is not going to caught by this cast statement because it is not an index bound exception. Instead it will be caught by this high level exception object, and it will print it out here. So if we go and compile this and then run this, we're going to see the cast exception and this one, but it's not clear whether it's coming from here or here. So we can just do a system.out.println here and just put like this so that we can see that IE is not getting printed here. So we do this and run, and we can see it's just the exception which is caught by this block and then the finally. So that is all I wanted to cover for today's video, an explanation of what is try-catch block and exception handling in Java, and what are the different best practices of exception handling in Java. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you are new to this channel and you think you are getting value out of this channel, please subscribe to the channel. And thanks so much for watching this video.